Section 1. The Meme, the Legend.
I should probably start this video by thanking all my new subscribers. I can see about 2,000 people have subscribed since I released my video on BPD, my own personal experience with borderline personality disorder, my struggles, my experience of stigma around mental health. Today we're talking about anime. So if you live in the West and you aren't actually an anime fan, you've probably only dependably seen the sort of childhood classics, Pokemon, Dragon Ball, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Just pretend I had a Digimon thing. Just pretend Digimon was good. But what if I told you that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was bad?
You there! Stop right now!
Nani? I mean, what?
I'm a lawyer from the Konami Corporation. This is a cease and desist letter. You have to stop talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And all other Konami properties on YouTube.com right now!
You won't get away with this!
Actually, we will. We know you can't afford to dispute a costly lawsuit.
Well, you can't afford for me to kick your ass!
Gah! Fine, we'll settle this the old-fashioned way. Standard rules 4,000 life points, and if you lose, you have to cease this video essay immediately.
Fine, but if you lose, I'm gonna send you to the fucking Shadow Realm. Go.
Really? That's your dueling outfit?
Yeah, it's comfy. I summon Time Wizard in attack position.
Get him, Eric!
Go on, Eric, give him what for.
This'll show him. I summon Gravekeeper's Vassal in attack position.
Whoa! Gee, what the fuck? What the heck?
Wow, that's a yikes.
So I wanted to do a little video about Yu-Gi-Oh! As an example of cultural appropriation. Mostly harmless example with some degree of insensitivity. It is still one culture appropriating the imagery of another, but it's not quite as clear-cut as, say, white Americans appropriating the imagery of indigenous American religion. I thought it would be a fun way to learn about that, and, I thought a fun framing device would be to have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle, so I ordered some cards. And among the cards that showed up was this one. Yep. So instead we're going to have a little chat today about why anime is so fucking cursed. Let's examine this idea. Anime is cursed. There are several compounding factors on what is essentially just a popular internet meme. First off, creepy bullshit. As well as the racism, the casual misogyny, the use of bizarre homophobic stereotypes of queer-coded effeminate men, and other tropes that hurt minoritized communities, there is a well-recognized trend of the sexualization of underage characters.
Yikes.
I want to avoid an accusation here that Japanese culture is inherently more biased towards bigoted or creepy bullshit. Because even if we admit that there is a prevalence of those things, and that prevalence might normalize those elements and result in more of them being made, it's not like Western media isn't full of bigoted or creepy bullshit that we'd all rather do without. And it doesn't do to talk like fetishization of youth is unique to Japan, and not just a feature of heteropatriarchy. Not to mention, these genres of anime have white Western fan bases too, quite passionate fan bases at that. There was recently an outrage from Western fanboys because Funimation re-subtitled one of their properties and translated the word lolicon, that's a person who is attracted to underage characters, to pedophile. Clearly a biased and unfair decision based on social justice sources such as the dictionary and how words work. Even beyond the sexualization of specifically underage characters in anime, there's a hypersexualization of women in general, usually described with the term fan service. Real talk, I hate this term. I hate the idea that fans have these needs that have to be serviced. And I'd say people should be able to make their art without having to capitulate to horny weirdos. Even if the horny weirdos weren't only a tiny minority of their audience. And to that, you might say, hey, fan service is a reliable way to get some people to come back and watch your show, and the only situation in which an artist wouldn't have to think about what the audience wants or expects is if they didn't have to think about profits at all, to which I'd say, now you're speaking my language, comrade. Next, right-wing influence. For a long time, anime online was co-opted by the absolute worst conceivable people. Anime imagery in memes and general posting trends has been a mainstay of parts of the internet like 4chan, the famous hive of far-right memeing, deliberate brutalization practices, and straight-up neo-Nazi bullshit.
Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. It's a video about anime. We're just gonna...
For a time, if you were an outsider to anime, your whole experience of it might have been seeing memes of uncomfortably sexualized, very young-looking girls saying stuff like, "Ooh, the Holocaust never happened, don't believe the Zionist lies!" It isn't still the case that the anime community online is completely dominated by white guys who want to debate one very specific free speech issue, but there's certainly still a community bias that way, and Nazis certainly never stopped posting anime waifu memes and idealizing anime as this SJW-free, pure space. Which brings us nicely onto the next compounding factor, Japanese conservatism. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, currently serving his 4th term as Prime Minister, is a far-right nationalist, and Japan's political history does include a long-standing empire, an alliance with the Nazis in World War II, horrifying war crimes, and more. The last factor to consider is that anime is somewhat of a pulp format. There exists a mainstream in publishing, and outside of that, a huge variety of relatively independent, relatively low scrutiny works. In a situation where there's little scrutiny, there is room for people to really push the boundaries of the format and experiment with new things inside the medium. And there's also room for, well, frankly, lots of awful garbage. I think there's very little value in saying things like, Japanese media is usually bigoted, rather than saying this piece of media has these problems, or this is how bigotry creeps into media and causes problems. It's unhelpful and divisive to say Japanese as if Japan is the problem, and we're better than them. It lets us off the hook. If you were to make an observation that was like, the problematic nature of American media centers around tacitly supporting modern white supremacy, whereas British media propagates racism through historical revisionism around the empire and colonialism, then I'd be like, hell yeah, that's a useful comparison. However, the other half of the sentence, Japanese media is usually sexist, is, and Western media is not. Worse than that, the sentence is probably, Japanese media is usually sexist, and normal media is not. We look at anime in this way from a Western perspective, and honestly I find it a little hypocritical to point to the worst examples of anime as problematic when we, as a culture, produced Gotham.
You're a hypnotist, right?
A hypnotherapist.
Ah, therapist. It's a funny word, therapist. Can either mean therapist or the rapist. So...
Now let's see who's really behind these bandages.
It turns out you can't criticize it, it's from another culture, is actually a very thin veil for things from other cultures are dumb and stupid. I don't have to think seriously about them, and I can enjoy all the homophobia and sexism and racism and big titty I like as long as it's from Japan. So I guess I need to convince you to take anime seriously in order to show you there's a problem. I guess to talk about this, I'm gonna first have to convince you that anime is good. I've decided the best approach I have is to talk about some animes I found that I really like.
Section 2. Some animes I found that I really like.
I have friends who stopped watching anime altogether because they found it to be so full of weird, bigoted bullshit. And when I was a very casual viewer, I'd check out an anime now and then that everyone was talking about, like One Punch Man, and I'd be enjoying it well enough. And then a black character would show up, the only one in the show, and he'd have thick pink lips and bulging eyes, and only ever show up to remind people how dim-witted he was. Or a gay character who's essentially one long prison rape joke. And then I'd stop watching anime for a few months. It's important to acknowledge this outsider perspective, because as much as I think it's created by the anime is cursed meme, I think this perspective also creates it. If the medium you were trying to break into instead was Western film and TV, and you tried watching Game of Thrones, or the Transformers films...
How old are you?
20.
This is illegal. She's a minor.
We're protected by the Romeo and Juliet laws. Statute 2705-3.
What? Texas statute?
There's a wealth of racism, misogyny, homophobia, creepy bullshit, and what we could easily call fan service that might firstly make you stop watching, and secondly draw exactly the same conclusions. I don't mind coming into a medium as a relative outsider, because I'm confident there will be a lot of engaging, interesting stuff I'm going to encounter. What I do mind is when people who describe themselves as the real fans of the medium virulently deny that their medium is actual art. So, let's look at some anime I encountered and what I liked about them.
Neon Genesis Evangelion is a pretty seminal piece, and as you watch anime that was created after it, you will see its influence everywhere. It's about a teenager called Shinji who gets a job at his dad's company. He's expected to pilot an enormous biomechanical fighter robot called an Evangelion, or Eva. Shinji has to do it because apparently only he can sync with the Eva, and also because his dad says so, and he runs the government organization. There's a meme about the show which is basically to joke about Shinji refusing to pilot the Eva. What's odd about this meme is that Shinji basically never actually... Wait, is this a spooky show? What's odd about this meme is that Shinji basically never actually refuses. He just complains and puts up resistance to it, and generally makes it clear he doesn't want to. And furthermore, every time he pilots the Eva, things go really badly. Arguably not as badly as if he hadn't, but never well. What's really odd about this meme is that it actually plays directly into the central conflict of the show. The driving conflict isn't humanity versus big space monsters, it's simply whether Shinji will or will not pilot the Eva. And that's because the show is about depression. Well, it's about other things too, but let's take a second here to look at the basic conceit of this story. The government has the resources to make 100-foot mechanical monstrosities and huge laser guns and all sorts of things, and decides to put the responsibility of saving the entire world using the most expensive weapons ever created by science on the shoulders of several 14-year-olds. That might be like a metaphor or something. The show is all about the conflict around Shinji being expected to take on this incredible responsibility to pilot this big body and do incredible things. The Evas themselves can be seen as metaphors for the expectations of society, the weight of living up to your parents' legacy, the day-to-day inability or ability of a depressed person to just get up and face the day, and more. Devilman Crybaby is a bold show. That's the best way to start in describing it. The animation style is at once consistent and also continually novel. The characters are deep and intriguing and thoroughly human and believable, and the story doesn't flinch in going places that others wouldn't. It also needs to be said, this show is a wild ride. As the series unfolds, you find yourself deeply invested in these characters and you really hope nothing bad will happen to them, and then lots of bad things happen to everyone. And then in the final act you realize it was about fascism the whole time.
Okay, wait, don't go away. I know this is coming from me, but this is what the show is actually about. I don't just mean this because an explicitly authoritarian regime rises to power in the final episodes of Devilman. Fascism isn't something that just happens in this show, it's what this show is about.
The story is a careful study of the way that the toxic elements of human socialization creep into our beliefs, our relationships, our politics, and become fascism. The final line of the show, a moment where a character who has been cold and unfeeling finally expresses grief and distress, reframes the whole story retrospectively as a beautifully apt metaphor for the way that fascism measures every person against a perfect ideal and closes in a tightening circle, eliminating everyone wrong and bad until there is nobody left.
Also, the show is extremely gay.
Mob Psycho 100 is poorly named. It's about a boy who you can very plainly read as being autistic, called Mob, who also has psychic powers, who is on a 0 to 100% scale at any moment towards an emotional outburst where his psychic powers will reach new levels. I'm very sure, given the context, that Mob Psyche 100 would have been closer to the wordplay they were actually trying to get at there, but as it is, we just gotta go along with this show about a very sweet and gentle and precious boy with a title that suggests it's about gang violence instead.
Mob works for Reigen Arataka, a fraud psychic with no actual powers who tells Mob that he is a very powerful psychic in order to get him to do real, actual exorcisms as Reigen's apprentice. Reigen isn't just exploiting Mob though, he's also taking care of him and looking out for him out of sincere concern because he knows Mob is sometimes confused by the world around him and needs a lot of guidance.
I have a hot take here. If you like the show Better Call Saul, there is a 100% chance you will like Mob Psycho 100. And not just because Reigen Arataka and Jimmy McGill are the same character. They are. But because it's about characters in a dog-eat-dog world who have hearts of gold. and just want to help each other. What more could you want? If your answer was for the show to be deeply aesthetically stunning, then you're in luck. This is one of the best drawn animes I've ever seen.
The show plays with different styles in a way that really elevates the animated format, in my opinion. It's normal in anime to sometimes mess around with the levels of detail on a face or body when illustrating different emotions, but Mob Psycho 100 uses entirely different art styles and levels of construction for this effect, sometimes using fully painted shots, sometimes using photographics, sometimes reducing the drawing down to only pencil, and occasionally mixing the styles within shots while somehow maintaining one cohesive aesthetic. Also, Mob is my precious son and I wish he was real just so that I could give him a hug, and I'm definitely doing a video about him really soon because I can't not.
So what can we learn looking at these examples? Well, firstly, that I'm clearly a huge fan of the screaming, crying boy genre of anime, but secondly, that these are all pieces of art with fantastic portrayals of the human condition, and mature themes, not just in the sense of being an edgy boy and showing big titties sometimes, but in the sense of asking questions that might make you uncomfortable, or presenting ideas about the way the world works and standing unflinchingly by them. But this isn't a good way for me to make my arguments here. I can't just list anime pieces, that's not sensible, otherwise I have to weigh and judge every anime in existence. So that's why I have friends! Yeah!
Here's why Gurren Lagann is great.
I don't know what to say, and here's why you should watch Fully Cooley.
Here's why Neon Genesis Evangelion is great.
Okay, here's why Cardcaptor Sakura rules.
Paranoia Agent is a 13-episode series that centers around a mysterious string of attacks by a shadowy assailant, given life by one character's need to escape reality, and given power by the subsequent spread of rumors and collective fear. It begins with character designer Tsukiko Sagi, creator of Moromi, who is adorable and also haunts my dreams, but then frequently shifts its style and focus to weave the narratives of characters together via a collective expression of individual trauma.
If you know anything about Evangelion, it's that it's a kaleidoscopic psychodrama about depression and loneliness and the pains of growing up, and also angels and giant mechs fighting each other in Tokyo. But what you might not know is that Shinji Ikari, the protagonist, is a closeted trans woman. Canonically. Because I say so.
Made by the same studio behind Neon Genesis Evangelion, and it kind of makes some references here and there to it. Just like little nod, kind of poking fun at it, and sort of poking fun at its fan base, especially, sadly, those of us who kind of think that it means something.
First of all, as much as Sakura is a capable and smart and tough girl, the show seemed to focus a lot on her worry and her confusion. She was concerned with really trying to do things right, a sort of antithesis to Sailor Moon's constant urge to nap and eat donuts.
For one thing, it's a show about bros. Bros hanging out with each other, fully loving each other and loving on each other, being responsible and caring, and wanting the best for each other. But also, there's this really cool scene right toward the end of the show where the protagonist is talking to the antagonist, and the antagonist is like, you have a 0.001% chance of winning. And the protagonist is like, any percent chance is just the same as 100% chance because I'm such a badass. And I always just thought that scene was really cool.
It's an exploration of escapism, whether that's delightful inanity or explosive violence. And to watch it now, after the rise of social media, the effect that's had on the spread of information and misinformation, as well as a growing list of things to escape and an online lexicon that increasingly vocalizes that desire through expressions of violence against the self, it's a show that's more relevant and relatable than ever. Like, yeah, just hit me with a bat.
Sakura also comes across as a relatively tomboyish character, which as a kid was super inspiring to me.
Now, obviously you don't have to be trans to identify with Shinji, and you may take his ennui in a different direction than I did, and you're perfectly valid and wrong for doing so. Regardless, he offers something as a protagonist that not a lot of art does. He is a teenage boy who is sad, who is desperate, who hates the position that he's in, and is inconsolable in all of these regards. Not to be mean, but he's kind of a pathetic loser, which is fair because so are all teenagers. That's the point. That's what being a teenager is.
Cardcaptor Sakura had a great combo of gripping magical quest, mythology and mysticism, explorations of the anxieties of growing up and being a person, and wholesome and touching relationships. I'm just saying, I would die for Yuki/Julian. I would die for him.
Okay, bye. Thank you so much.
I've got you now. I attack your What Kiwi with Gravekeeper's Vassal and destroy it. Now I attack you directly with Gravekeeper's Oracle.
Section 3. Rambling bullshit about art.
I think it's worth taking a second to talk about the dimensions of media. What I mean by that is the different elements that make up a medium. For example, in video, there's the visual and the audio elements, but also what designers call affordances. The relationships between the properties of a product and the abilities of the user or consumer of that product. For example, books have words and we can read, therefore books afford being read. But something that differentiates books from blogs is that books have physical pages and we can turn pages. Therefore books, as opposed to digital media, afford having their pages turned. Let's look at two different media executing a nearly identical concept. In the end of the prestige drama The Sopranos, Tony Soprano is dining with his family and then the show cuts sharply to black, leaving a possible interpretation that Tony has died. In Saga Volume 7, the final pages directly following a death are entirely black, save for the words, "and then," on the first page. 6 A4 pages of total pitch blackness. When The Sopranos cut to black, many people reported thinking their TV had broken. When you read the end of Saga Volume 7, you know from that first of 6 pages, and then, that this is all there's going to be. Blackness. However, you have to keep making the choice to turn the page to show yourself the rest of those empty, black pages. I wanted to consider the dimensions of a medium in order to point out that essentially this is all a medium is. There can be implicit biases in a medium, for example in terms of accessibility for disabled people. This is an ongoing discourse around video games. But animation as a medium doesn't have implicit political or cultural biases. So there's a media aspect to anime that needs considering, but also a cultural one. Anime is, of course, the subset of the animated medium relating specifically to Japan. Japanese culture and anime will always play off one another and influence one another. And so I think we need to consider that comparison between Japanese and Western culture that I was discussing before. The comparison between Western media and anime is fairly clear to see through the live-action Netflix adaptation of the anime Death Note, a show about a high-achieving student who is granted the ability to kill anyone by writing their name in a book while picturing their face. In the Netflix version, Light Yagami, the high-achieving student and flawless godchild, becomes Light Turner, a loner loser kid who everyone hates and who hates everyone right back. In his introductory sequence, he is shown telling a bully that because he is technically a minor, if the bully hits him, he will go on a list as a logical proof that the bully can't hit him. The bully, of course, just hits him. The psychology of this character is pretty interesting, because just like Light Yagami, he is emotionally stunted and believes in an absolute system of morality. But he can see that system of morality isn't being upheld. And then he gets the power to kill anyone he wants. What would this story, centering on an American high school student, have to say about loner loser kids who are suddenly granted the ability to kill anyone they want? The thing about this adaptation is that while it doesn't really stay that close to the source material, it seemingly doesn't aim to. It's a cultural translation, rewriting the story to make it work better as an American version of the same core concepts. But the fact that a live-action adaptation is considered necessary at all is itself a cultural translation. Lots of anime has been shown to children in America and Europe because it's only considered marketable to children. In many cases, anime has been re-edited or censored to make it appropriate for a younger demographic than it was originally intended for. And this is because our assumption, culturally, is that all animated media is silly and unimportant, and just for kids. Which I have to feel is part of the reason why anime is seen as beyond criticism and serious analysis. Which brings us, in a way that you'll have to slightly bear with me for, to How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. This book is about how Donald Duck and other Disney comic strips spread pro-American, pro-capitalist propaganda to the rest of the world, specifically South America, which at the time of writing was going through various struggles between capitalist and socialist movements. The early critics of this book took this exact stance. You can't criticize Disney because Disney is for children. So if you criticize it, you just hate joy. From the books, Instructions on How to Expel Someone from the Disneyland Club. The authors of this book are to be defined as follows. Indecent and immoral, while Disney's world is pure. Hyper-complicated and hyper-sophisticated, while Walt is simple, open, and sincere. Members of a sinister elite, while Disney is the most popular man in the world. Political agitators, while Disney is non-partisan, above politics. Calculating and embittered, while Walt D is spontaneous, emotional, loves to laugh and make laughter. Finally, cultivators of Marxism fiction, a theory imported from abroad by wicked foreigners, while Uncle Walt is against exploitation and promotes the classless society of the future. This passage fits spookily well onto defenders of anime from serious media analysis. And Gamergate too, for that matter. But anime isn't literally propaganda from an imperialist regime, whereas Goofy is, and I will destroy him if it takes my last dying breath.
Gorsh.
Wait, where was I going with all this?
Section 4. Where I was going with all that.
One is the pseudonym of the manga artist behind both One Punch Man and Mob Psycho 100. They were originally created by the same person, and while I was put off One Punch Man by the weird bigoted bullshit, Mob Psycho 100 nearly completely escapes it, except that again, there is just one side character who is drawn as a weird blackface minstrel style cartoon. I don't know what to say about this besides, hey man, please stop. The best reason I can see for why this would be this way is the normalization of bigotry through tropes. Japan is among the most homogeneous societies in the world, and along with this goes the possibility, likelihood even, that some artists will have had more exposure to racist blackface cartoons than actual black people in real life. Besides, there will be tropes in Japanese media that we won't immediately recognize, and therefore they'll stick out to us as odd. Whereas there will be tropes in media we're used to that would easily fly right over our heads because we don't see anything unusual about them. For example, in anime, Screaming Boy is a recognizable trope, and that's not really a thing in Western media. Or where it is, it's not a repeated and copied element. That's a fairly harmless example, but other tropes that might stand out to first-time viewers contributing to the notion that anime is thoroughly cursed include inappropriate touching or groping of female characters as a funny, awkward moment, men dressing as women as a joke, and that's the whole joke, is that it's a man dressed as a woman. Or as I've been discussing, black characters being drawn as absolutely horrific racist stereotypes, usually paired with stereotypical behaviors such as stupidity or laziness. These stereotypes and forms of bigotry are fairly cross-cultural, so yeah. The blackface cartoons probably originated with Jim Crow era racist cartoons from America, and we have the joke of a man dressing as a woman here too, with no consideration for how it spreads toxic ideas about gender. There is an instance of this trope in Mob Psycho, and also in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so let's look at them for a second. In Mob Psycho, Reigen disguises himself as a woman in order to gain entry to a private girls' school to meet a client. In JoJo, Jojo disguises himself as a woman in order to get past military guards. So the setup is the same. In both instances, a character disguises themselves to gain entry to somewhere. In Mob Psycho, Reigen is rejected by the guard who calls him a disgusting pervert, and then later, much to Reigen's chagrin, it's on the news. In JoJo, however, Jojo is rejected by the guards when they see through his disguise, and he is genuinely insulted because he wanted to be beautiful as a lady. This subverts the trope, and it's genuinely funny, and it's endearing to the character. He then knocks them out with magic coconuts. Point is, there are tropes, but that doesn't excuse it from being bad writing. There are examples where people write something and it's in line with the trope, but it's still enjoyable and good writing and doesn't hurt anyone. But look, why do I want to talk about problematic elements in media I like? If I like Mob Psycho so much that I'm willing to just ignore the shitty parts, why talk about it at all, right? Why do we do the SJW woke policing? What do we as media analysts hope to gain? Well, the simple and obvious answer is that bigotry in media hurts people and makes their life genuinely harder. But I suspect there are going to be people, charming individuals in my comments section, who won't fall for such subjective nonsense. So try this one. Racism is poor writing. Any kind of stereotyping, any kind of writing that lazily relies on a trope instead of creating real, rounded characters that feel human and understandable is bad writing, and we are more than valid in calling it out, from a media standpoint alone. So guess what? Anime isn't going to be SJW free anymore. I'm coming to take away your waifus and your weird racist bullshit. By which I mean, no, anime is good and fine, and it's fine to enjoy it, as long as we're all on the same page about the bad stuff. But if you're not on the same page...
Why is he laughing? He shouldn't be laughing.
Because I've just drawn the last piece of Exodia the Forbidden One!
Oh! Impossible! No one's ever been able to summon him!
Exodia!
You don't actually summon Exodia, technically. There are only 5 monster slots on the field, and if you had any monsters down, then you wouldn't be able to summon Exodia, because there are 5 pieces. You win the game by having all the cards in your hand. The show got it wrong, is what I'm saying.
Exodia! Obliterate!
Was that a clip from the actual show?
What are they going to do? Sue us?
Sir, they've defeated the copyright lawyer in battle!
Well then, we're going to have to resort to more drastic measures.
Hey everyone, hope you liked the video. You've just been watching the abridged version of The Great Debate, Is Anime Cursed? If you head over to patreon.com/curiovids and support this channel for $2 or more, you can see the unabridged 46-minute version. And if I surpass $600 a month on Patreon, I will make that version public, as it was originally a Patreon goal. This month I'd like to recommend you subscribe to Tash Reynolds, who has a fantastic video about fan service that actually helped me write this video, as well as a video talking about their experiences with bipolar disorder that they made after watching my video about BPD. I'd also like to recommend Tony, who makes really entertaining and incredibly moving pieces by redubbing anime. If you're familiar with the concept of anime abridged series, then you know what Tony does, except Tony does it unlike anything you've ever seen. I'd like to thank Han the Man and Bathymetrics for the wonderful music they make for this channel, and Natalie for the cover that you're hearing right now. As well as Joe, Ash, Natalie and Harry for all starring in my anime nonsense, and Finn for doing sketches for these credits. Not to mention my wonderful Patreon supporters who make this all possible. And you, the viewer, for watching all the way to the end. See you next time.
Hello? Is anyone there?